So I've been working on this, worked on it a little bit, not a lot, maybe an hour or two. Okay. So what you can see what I've done is I've toned down the sky. Okay. And the way that I did that was by putting down a gray mixed with the complements, equal proportions, and white, and I put that on thin. And that not only went over the sky area, but also on the mountain, because the mountain needed to get pushed back. Because this is the idea here with this painting is that we're trying to get this illusion of space. So the contrast here needed to be less than what it was. The color needed to be less saturated than what it was. So that helped to do that. And then I went on top of that with a lighter gray for the lighter areas, and then a darker gray, tending more toward the cool, so having a little bit more green in it. In this area, I painted in, well, this is still going to need to get more worked, but it is a darker, warmer mixture. So I'd say the green and the red, but a little bit more red maybe. And so that makes it sort of a dark brown color. And then you can see in the shadow areas of the bushes here, that's a slightly greener version of that mixture. So with like no white in it at all, okay? And then on top, because there's these wood chip things in the picture, and the wood chips are a little bit warmer, so I used a pink, basically. It was a somewhat muted pink, and then just used a sort of a flicking motion with a flat. There's one of these. Okay. Probably this one. Okay. So this is saying it's a number 6 flat crystal. So going on top with that. And then on the green in here, what I did was I put down what you see here is the middle value. So taking this sort of middle green, the green was brighter when it was on the palette. And when it goes on top of this more, brownish color, it mutes the green. And you can see that the greens in the actual picture are pretty muted, right? So I don't want them real intense. The most intense green is going to be this plant here in the foreground, which I did nothing to. Although if you think about what it was before, it looks a lot more saturated now that it's got this next to it, okay? And that has to do with both the value contrast and the contrast of the colors. So these pink sort of just little hatching strokes going on top to sort of duplicate the idea of the wood chips. And there's going to be more of those. There's going to be some cast shadows that might not need to be really any darker value-wise than what's here now. It's just that the area around it is going to get lighter. So you'll see me doing some more of that when it comes time. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to paint one of the bushes, probably in this area here, and you can see how that's going to start with that sort of middle value, and then going to the darker, and then the lights on top. Now the lighter parts of the bush in the actual picture would be more of a yellow green. This is not, but I don't have a yellow green, right? So it would be a matter of having it a more vivid, light green, or maybe having it warmer. So maybe having the pink on top. We'll have to see what it's going to look like. Okay. Oh, and I also did change the road a little bit, so it needed to come further back and a little bit higher up. So painted that on top, and that's just the sort of a muted pink mixed the red and a little bit of green mixed in with it. Paint in. That's a little too warm, so I'm going to want the cooler one. So I have these mixed up on my palette. green was a little too saturated. The thing that I'm gonna have to keep thinking about is the saturation level, and you can see by making it that saturated how much that pops forward. So I've got the grayed down value over here that I'm just gonna put on top of that. You also see how these dark values help to push back the space. So now I'm getting these lighter areas at the top. And I'm using the pink. If I was painting this naturalistically, this would be more of a yellow, a light yellow green. But it's the warmth that I want right now. So yellow green would be warmer than the green itself. When you see the greens that are just made with the white, you can see how cool those are. So that warmth really does stand out a little bit. Same thing is going to happen up in here. A lot of what you're going to see is going to be sort of implied. And a lot of times you'll see, like if you're in a museum, you see a landscape, something from a distance looks really detailed. And when you get up close, you see, oh, no, it isn't. So this is the darker ground color that's going to be that it's on top of. So you have to think about the form of the plant. So that means just like a sphere would have a light side and a shadow side, it's going to be that happening in here too. So the shadow over on this side. Over on that side. So you can see we're starting to develop that a little bit more. So this may end up being too much. As I'm looking at it, the saturation level might be a little bit too green, so we're going to need to maybe knock that down a little bit with the gray. And that's kind of what you're going to be doing as you're working on this portion of it. You're going to be thinking about, okay, so spatially what has to happen? If something's too saturated and it comes forward and it's in the middle ground, it comes forward more than what's going on in the foreground, then that's a problem, okay? Most of the time. There can be a situation where you've got more light on the middle ground and and less in the foreground, and then that could happen, but we're trying to avoid that in our demonstration here. And within the actual plant itself, it's real unclear as to where the shadow starts in the plant and where the ground is. Okay, so that we'll make it that way in here too. Okay. So this is going to get a little bit more developed in there. Let's show you how we were doing this. I didn't do anything to this, and you can see that just by doing stuff around it seems a lot more vivid than it did before. So what I'm talking about here, so these little paint that this is going on top of is wet. Okay, so that's another thing. If this pink went on just on top of this dry, it would be seeming a lot more vivid. Because we want this more muted. If you look at those, they don't look like they're pink necessarily. They do look lighter. The other problem with this, because I had to stretch this composition out a little bit, it's going to be probably more of this area than there is in the actual picture. And as I'm doing this, thing is you have to keep thinking about not just how often to wipe your brush, because every time you put a second stroke on, that one is going to be a little bit more muted than the first one you put on because you're picking up what's underneath. So you're thinking about that, but you also, when you're doing this, have to think about the scale of these little strokes you're making versus the ones back here, because these are going to be a lot smaller and a lot less defined. Okay, you're going back on that. Hopefully you don't have some crazy texture like this. I should have thought about that when I was picking out the picture. It was going to be, having to do this was going to be a pain. And it may be that when this is dry a little bit, then I'll go on top again, okay, with that, with the brush to get maybe a few of these to stand out a little bit more. This saturated green is really bothering me. So as you're doing this, I'm making the paint thin, but I'm not making it thin so much with medium. I'm making it thin by the layer that I'm spreading out. I didn't say it before, I'll say it now, that we are trying to work from dark to light, right? So we want to make sure that we are putting down a darker value first and then putting the lights on top. So I have that darker value right now, and this is a lighter. So grade down green. So a lot of times students ask me if we have to work, do the background first and work from the background to the foreground. You could do that. I don't do that. It's I kind of jump around. Um, the and you'll see that I just kind of pick on an area and then I concentrate on that area for a while and get it to a point where I'm like, okay, that looks okay, and then maybe move on to something else and then come back to that. So I do that when I'm drawing as well. I mean, I'm constantly working on varying different areas, so it's kind of the same with this. But you can start to see now the differences in what we had in just one layer of paint, right? In that thin layer of paint on just on the regular gesso canvas, and now as we're starting to use the paint on top of that, it even if it isn't remarkably thicker, it's the paint quality is a lot richer. Seeming. For me, the sky's not finished. The sky's still going to need to have more paint on it, but on the next layers, if I was walking around in class with you, that's the thing that I'm talking about to students a lot of the time, is that your paint quality needs to start to get richer as you're developing the painting. Okay, so I'm done talking. I'll keep working, and this will probably be sort of a fast motion now as we're working on this, and we'll just get it a little bit further. But certainly by the second painting day, your painting should start. The way this looks now is that would be kind of a goal. Okay, that you get start to get some definition, start to figure out sort of the space, getting the space to work the way that it's supposed to. Where you have your foreground, your middle ground, your background. Okay, so those are the things that we need to see.